Number 10. James Barry and Melanie Eam. 21-year-old James Barry was found stabbed to death in his Loxahatchee, Florida home one morning in 2016. He had recently gone through a rough breakup with his ex-girlfriend, 20-year-old Melanie Eam, landing her at the top of the Palm Beach County Sheriff's suspect list. By then, she had gone on the run, but she had left her cell phone behind. Barry's parents, Nicola and James Sr., told CBS 12 that their son was selfless and always put other people first. In the words of his father, "We live in an I society." That was the opposite of James. But even the kindest people have a limit to the type of behavior they'll tolerate from others, and the young man had apparently reached his when it came to Melanie. According to court documents, Barry told Eam he didn't love her, and she went over to his house and murdered him with a butcher knife. A neighbor's surveillance camera captured footage of Eam's car coming and going on the night of his death. She fled to her aunt's home in Silver Spring, Maryland, and her cousin, who lives at the house, reported Eam's whereabouts to law enforcement. A Palm Beach detective traveled to the home and interviewed the young woman, who confessed to stabbing Barry and handed over the shirt she was wearing when she committed the crime. The victim's blood was also found in her car. A jury found Eam guilty of second-degree murder with a weapon, and she received a 50-year prison sentence. She appealed her conviction, but the ruling was upheld. Number 9. Tasha Williams. When her boyfriend broke up with her one morning in 2019, 35-year-old Tasha Williams reportedly took her anger out on her pet poodle by throwing the dog off her third-floor balcony in Gretna, Louisiana. Her 29-year-old ex-boyfriend told police that he tried to leave the apartment after ending the relationship, but Williams blocked him at the door and swung at him with a wine bottle. She then began throwing out his belongings, including his computer, and then flung her own dog off the balcony. The poodle died from its injuries. Williams and her ex continued to argue as they went outside, where she allegedly picked up the dog's body and threw it into the bed of his truck. She then tried to run the man over with her own car, according to the Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office. The car struck a fence and another vehicle during her repeated attempts to mow her ex-boyfriend down. Luckily, he managed to move out of the way and avoided getting hit. Authorities charged Williams with cruelty to animals, domestic abuse battery, domestic abuse aggravated assault, and 3 counts of criminal damage to property. Number 8. Kyla ONeill and Dante McRae. 31-year-old Kyla ONeill was just weeks away from giving birth in early 2023 when she was shot outside the Amazon warehouse in Lakeville, Minnesota. She was rushed to the hospital where doctors performed an emergency C-section in an attempt to save her son, Messiah. Sadly, neither of the 2 victims survived. Authorities charged ONeill's ex-fiancé, 32-year-old Dante Raphael McRae, with second-degree manslaughter, which was eventually upgraded to second-degree murder. He reportedly told police that he and ONeill had been fighting most of the day because Kyla had found out he had a child with another woman while she was pregnant. Records show that McRae was banned from owning a gun due to past convictions. He has allegedly given several different versions of what happened in the time leading up to the shooting. Kyla left behind 3 surviving children, including a daughter she and McRae had together. Her mother, Katina ONeill, told CBS News that her daughter had broken up with McRae shortly before the shooting and that she wanted nothing to do with him after learning of his infidelity. She also planned to give her new baby her last name instead of McRae's. On the day of the crime, one of ONeill's children called their grandmother and asked her to come over because McRae was getting aggressive with Kyla. A witness told police that McRae repeatedly threatened ONeill that day and that they had to break up a scuffle between the pair, which involved Kyla breaking McRae's phone. During the heated argument, McRae allegedly threatened to kill Kyla if she let another man near his kids and warned her that she wasn't bulletproof. According to a criminal complaint, McRae eventually admitted to pointing the gun at ONeill and pulling the trigger out of anger while she dropped him off at Amazon, where he worked. He claimed he didn't realize there was still a bullet in the chamber. McRae is being held on $2 million bail while the case proceeds in court. Number 7. Bradley Lewis and Abigail White. In early 2022, 22-year-old Bradley Lewis told his girlfriend, self-described fake Barbie and OnlyFans model Abigail White, that he no longer wanted to be with her. The pair nevertheless went out to a pub in Kingswood, England with some friends that evening. Witnesses would later describe how White was in a difficult mood, claiming that she was starting verbal and physical fights with people before she and Lewis left the pub and went home, where the disagreement from earlier that day apparently continued. 20 minutes later, White called for an ambulance and screamed to a neighbor for help. She had stabbed Lewis in the heart. The victim was rushed to the hospital, where he was pronounced dead. White initially claimed Lewis had stabbed himself, but she failed to convince authorities and was arrested for murder. She told the jury that she was walking away from Lewis to get away from the confrontation when she saw the knife and got the idea to scare him with it. As she approached Lewis, she plunged the blade into his chest. She tearfully insisted it was an accident when she took the stand in her own defense, stating in her own words that it just happened. A psychologist who performed a mental evaluation of White told the court that 99% of people would be better at controlling their anger than the defendant was. The expert claimed that the thinking part of White's brain shuts down when she gets upset, and that she lacked the ability to cope with her emotions in acceptable ways. A forensic psychiatrist diagnosed White with borderline personality disorder and said that her condition was a reason to consider a conviction with diminished responsibility due to her mental state. But the jury wasn't sold on the idea that White's mental illness made her less culpable, and they convicted her of murder. She was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 18 years. In early 2023, she made headlines for urging British authorities to allow prisoners to have conjugal overnight visits. White reportedly has a new man, but can't be intimate with him because prisoners are only allowed daytime visits and their interactions are supervised. Unfortunately for her, the United Kingdom's prison system seems to have no plans to change their current policy. Number 6. Marquis Lane and Brittany Ward. In early 2023, 31-year-old Marquis Lane was fatally gunned down in front of his young son near his apartment building in the Bronx. Police suspected his ex-girlfriend and the little boy's mother, Brittany Ward, of somehow being involved. According to the NYPD, Lane assaulted Ward shortly before the shooting. Surveillance video reportedly shows Lane punching his ex-girlfriend and knocking her over a guardrail before picking her up off the ground and continuing to assault her. 2 weeks later, authorities arrested Brittany's new boyfriend, 30-year-old Aaron Reen, as he entered his apartment building in the Morrisania neighborhood. Prosecutors alleged that Reen came to Ward's aid during the assault and that he shot Lane. Shortly after the incident, the New York Daily News reported that the victim has dozens of prior arrests, including at least 3 incidents in which cops described him as emotionally disturbed. The accused killer, Reen, has 1 unsealed prior arrest. He's being held without bail on a murder charge, pending the outcome of his case. Given the differences in Reen and Lane's criminal histories and the story about Ward being assaulted by her ex, it initially seemed like self-defense may have played a role in the shooting. But that changed as investigators uncovered evidence indicating that Lane was set up. A few weeks after Reen's arrest, authorities accused Brittany Ward of co-conspiring with him to lure Lane to his death and arrested her in connection with the case. Prosecutors claim they found evidence of a text conversation between Ward and Reen discussing Lane's whereabouts and confirming his location shortly before the shooting. Ward's lawyer insists she is being wrongfully accused and that she was at the scene to pick up her son, but authorities no longer appear to see her as a victim. She's currently at home on an electronic monitoring device while awaiting her next court date. Number 5. Archana Demand. After finding out that her boyfriend Adesh was cheating on her in early 2023, 28-year-old flight attendant Archana Demand traveled to his apartment in Karamangala, India. Her sister, Archana Demand, would later tell police that Archana found out about the affair through a friend of the couple. She reportedly planned to confront Adesh and break up with him. It's unclear how serious Archana was about those plans. After traveling to see Adesh, supposedly to break up with him, the two went to a movie. An argument broke out after they returned to Adesh's apartment, at which point Archana threatened legal action over the affair, which is apparently an option in India. Archana's family were unaware that she had gone to Adesh's apartment. It came as a complete surprise when they received a late-night call informing them that Archana had fallen from the 4th floor unit and died. Investigators initially ruled the death as suicide, but revisited the case after receiving tips that Archana may have been murdered. They now believe Adesh killed her for threatening legal action. The investigation is ongoing, and they are unsure whether the victim was killed before she was shoved out of the apartment or if she died in the fall. Adesh was arrested, and the case is now in the hands of India's notoriously slow criminal justice system. Number 4. Anne Bellamy and Alandis Johnson. 43-year-old Anne Bellamy couldn't accept that her 20-year-old relationship with her son's father, 42-year-old Alandis Slim Johnson, was over after he broke up with her in 2017. Months passed, and Johnson moved on and began dating someone new. But Bellamy remained fixated on her ex, and she eventually decided that if she couldn't have him, nobody would. On New Year's Eve, Johnson's new girlfriend entered his apartment and found him dead on the living room floor from a single gunshot wound to the eye. At the scene, investigators found footprints leading up to a broken window and an Adidas woman's shoe matching the prints, as well as a ski mask. The next day, Bellamy showed up to speak with investigators. She claimed she learned about the murder when she called Johnson's phone, and his girlfriend picked up and told her what happened. She played the part of a grieving ex very convincingly at first, so much so in fact that she helped Johnson's family plan his funeral. Bellamy told detectives that she was at work until 10:00 p.m. the night before, but a co-worker said that they were pretty sure she left at 9. Surveillance footage from a passing bus showed her getting into her car at around that time, and the evidence pointing to her possible involvement in Johnson's murder only continued to stack up. Johnson and Bellamy's son reportedly said that the left-behind shoe at the crime scene resembled a pair his father had given to his mother as a gift. A search of Bellamy's phone revealed that she had been text messaging people in search of a handgun just days before the murder. According to the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, one person told Bellamy to calm down and warned her not to get herself in trouble. In response, she said she would calm down when she handled her business. A co-worker eventually admitted to selling her a gun, and Bellamy's DNA was found on the ski mask at the crime scene. Bellamy denied any involvement in Johnson's murder for a year before she finally owned up to her actions and pleaded guilty as part of a plea deal. Johnson's family implored the judge to hand down the maximum 50-year sentence, but she was sentenced to 20 years in accordance with the prosecutor's recommendation. Number 3. Texas Love Triangle. Robin and Jeremy Spielbauer married in 2005 after a whirlwind romance and went on to have 2 children together. At some point, Jeremy began cheating on Robin with the couple's friend, Katie Phipps, who they attended church with. Robin eventually discovered the affair, and after 8 years of marriage, the Spielbauers divorced. Jeremy and Katie were married a year later. The newlyweds lived just a few houses down from Robin, who tried to keep the peace with her ex-husband and his new wife for the sake of their children. But Katie grew to viciously hate Robin and eventually became convinced that Jeremy was cheating on her with his ex. The relationship between Robin and Katie grew increasingly explosive over time. On several occasions, disagreements between the women erupted into physical fights. In early 2014, Robin was found dead on a roadside next to her SUV. She had been shot in the head. Traces of pink paint on Robin's SUV window matched the pink frame of a gun owned by Katie, putting her at the center of the investigation. She admitted she hated Robin, but adamantly denied any involvement in the murder. A search of Katie's cell phone revealed numerous accusatory and threatening texts that she had sent to Jeremy regarding her suspicions of his affair with Robin. Katie claimed she was at a friend's house at the time of the murder, and the alibi initially seemed to check out. On Jeremy's phone, investigators found a conversation revealing that he had plans to meet up with Robin that night. He told investigators that they were planning to talk about something related to their children, but that he forgot to show up for it because he was hanging out at home with his uncle and lost track of time. Prosecutors became convinced that Katie was responsible for the murder and charged her in the case. She languished in jail for over a year while the investigation continued, and much to law enforcement's surprise, forensic evidence proved that Katie couldn't have been at the crime scene when Robin was killed. Meanwhile, the evidence against Jeremy had continued to accumulate. Surveillance footage proved that his vehicle was near the scene around the time of the murder, and Jeremy's previous claims that he had no opportunity to leave home and commit the crime were disproven. He also gave conflicting versions of how he spent the evening. Katie was eventually released and cleared of any wrongdoing. She divorced Jeremy and moved on with her life, and he was indicted for capital murder. The jury found him guilty of the lesser offense of murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison. Number 2. Ellie Gould and Thomas Griffiths. Scottish high school student Ellie Gould broke up with her boyfriend of 3 months, Thomas Griffiths, in 2019 after deciding that she wanted to spend more time focusing on her grades. She was getting close to finishing school and hoped to become a police officer, and it was a priority for her to keep her marks up. And she also simply didn't feel like Griffiths was the right person for her, so she ended things. To say Griffiths didn't take the breakup well would be an understatement. The very next morning, he drove to Gould's house and the two got into a heated argument. Griffiths lost his temper and tried to strangle Gould, then took a knife from her kitchen and stabbed her 13 times. She died from her injuries. After spending more than an hour trying to wipe up the blood at the crime scene, Griffiths washed the knife off and placed it in Ellie's hand, hoping it would convince police that her injuries were self-inflicted. Using his dead ex-girlfriend's finger, he unlocked her cell phone and text messaged a friend who was supposed to pick her up, saying that she didn't need a ride. Griffiths dumped some of the bloody items from the crime scene in the woods and went to school. A few hours later, he told some of his friends that he and Gould were going on a trip together. He also texted Gould asking her to meet up with him, presumably in the hopes that detectives would take it as a sign that he didn't know about the murder. By the end of the day, police had him in custody on suspicion of Gould's murder. He was found guilty and was sentenced to life with a minimum of 12.5 years. Gould's family does not feel that justice has been served and has campaigned relentlessly for strengthened laws that would allow for harsher punishments against young offenders who commit serious crimes. In 2021, the UK Parliament passed new legislation allowing teenage killers to be treated as adults. Unfortunately, the bill isn't retroactive, so it didn't change Griffith's sentence. But it will hopefully prevent families of future victims from going through the same hellish pursuit for true justice. Number 1. Joey Fisher. After Joey Fisher broke up with his girlfriend, Christina, in 1992, the girl's mother, Dora Cisneros, became obsessed with trying to get the pair back together. She thought of Joey as a responsible young man from an esteemed family and a rarity among the typically wild local boys in their Brownsville, Texas suburb. But Joey wasn't interested in getting back together with Cisneros' daughter, even after she offered to pay him. At some point, he started to get angry at her insistence and told her to stop bugging him to do something he didn't want to do. Fisher and Christina eventually started dating other people. In early 1993, just when it seemed like the drama might finally be over, someone rushed up to Fisher from behind and shot him twice, execution style, in his driveway while he sprayed dust off his car one morning before school. He died from gunshot wounds to his head and chest. Witnesses described the suspect as a short, bearded Hispanic man with Mexican license plates. At the time, Fisher's family and friends couldn't think of anyone who might hate him enough to kill him. Police initially theorized that the murder was a drive-by shooting. They also considered the possibility that a drug gang shot him in a case of mistaken identity. The investigation eventually led them to a man named Daniel El Guero Orlando Garza, who admitted that he agreed to arrange the murder in exchange for spiritual help from a local fortune teller, Maria Mercedes Martinez de Sanchez. As it turned out, Dora Cisneros had gone to the same fortune teller after her daughter's breakup with Fisher. During their first meeting, Martinez told Cisneros that Fisher no longer loved her daughter. Cisneros returned to Martinez and asked her to put a spell on the young man. She went to the fortune teller a third time and asked if she could arrange to have Fisher beaten up, only to escalate the request to murder, claiming that Fisher had done horrible things to Christina. Desperate for spiritual help for his own problems, Garza found two hitmen who drove to the US from Mexico and committed the murder. Authorities failed to get the alleged hitmen extradited to the US, but they managed to bring the rest of the suspects to justice. Garza and Cisneros were sentenced to life in prison for their roles in the crime, while Martinez received a 20-year sentence. Thanks for watching. Would you rather uproot your entire life and move hundreds of miles away to escape harassment and stalking from an ex who refuses to move on, or spend 6 months in jail before clearing your name on false allegations your ex made because they were mad at you for breaking up with them? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye.